All right. Go, Janet.
Okay. All right, let's just start down the questions. Should we really teach that if you don't know what you are voting for, then you shouldn't vote? You want to comment on that?
I'll go. I'm still not muted. Oh man, I was so confused. I know the church encourages us to be informed so we can vote, but I'm not sure what the stance is still on if you're not informed. I don't know. Anyway, I'm never informed ever. So I tend to not vote, especially locally, because I just feel like I would just be guessing. And I don't think that's really worth anything unless I just go with my political party. But yeah, if you guys have any more insight, I'm a little confused on that one.
Yeah, I think they gave us both ends of the spectrum. You know, they gave us you should always be voting, you should be informed all the time. Then it's impossible to be completely informed. I think so. I kind of agree. If you don't know some of the issues, then you don't vote on that particular thing. That's what I like about voting is that you can vote on the particular things you want to vote on. Then you can leave something blank. So if I feel like I'm going to mess something up, I just leave it blank.
Yeah, I feel like it's like really tempting when I pay attention to like the president of the United States because that one's like important, but I don't really pay attention to like my mayor, the city council, like the community level, which I'm now learning is probably pretty important to pay attention to. But I think it's just really easy sometimes when you hear your friends talk about stuff and they're supporting the leader who's in your political party and you're just like hearing rumors basically. You haven't researched it out yourself, but it's really easy to just go, oh, well, this person I trust is voting for this, and they've said these couple of good things about this person, and I've run out of time, and it's time to vote already, so might as well just go vote there because it's probably okay. But we really do need to be informed, and I think that was a bit of a good lesson for me to learn, So I think I'm under the impression that we really should be informed or probably not vote, because if you just have a bunch of people making uninformed votes, your chances of voting someone into office who really isn't doing what you think they're doing is going to be a lot higher. So.
All right. Anybody else want to weigh in? No? Okay. How do we reconcile the premise about John Stossel, the letter from the first presidency, which states, "We urge church members to register to vote, to study the issues and candidates carefully, and then vote for those they believe will most nearly carry out their ideas of good government." So I kind of bumbled that whole question, but anybody else want to?
That was a really wordy question. So I think what that's saying is, do your best to be as informed as you can. But, I'm kind of like Stacy, like I'm not informed because there's not room in my head for politics. Like Courtney was saying, obviously when there's a presidential election, you can't help but be informed because that's all that's on social media is election stuff. But I think it is important to be more informed about the community stuff because those are the people that are making bills, drafting bills that are going to go, I don't know. I think we sometimes think that those other levels are less important, but they're probably really more important because they're the ones that are passing things that directly affect, families. But I do think we should get as involved as we can. One thing that I've done, and this maybe is bad, but I rely a lot on my husband because we have the same values. And I know he's not going to tell me to vote for somebody who's bad. So I think in a way it could be good if you're not informed and you have someone who is that you trust. You can maybe say, tell me a little bit about this candidate. And that's maybe one way to be a little bit more informed if you don't have time to go and study everything.
Yeah, I think a lot of it goes along with what Alyssa said in one of the previous meetings about sometimes we feel like we're choosing the lesser of two evils. But really, if you only got two options, you only got two options. So might as well pick the one who is going to help, who's going to be the closest to your values. So I agree with what the first presidency states. And I also think with Misty, what you're saying about relying on someone who you trust. I know my husband does that for me because he could care less about politics, but he wants to vote. And I'm like the one who talks about it all the time. So he kind of has developed, I think, a lot of his ideas from me and from his parents growing up. Sometimes I think it's good to have your own beliefs, but especially when you're the same religion and you have a lot of the same moral beliefs, I think it does. You kind of do have similar beliefs to people, but I do think it is important to some, at least minor extent, study things for yourself too, because everyone, even in marriage and stuff, will have slightly different opinions about things.
Okay, so the next question is concerning the 2 videos we watched with the 2 girls, young girls, stating their beliefs on same-sex marriage. Do you think these girls were being sincere or just parroting back things their parents told them to say?
I kind of wrote a little bit about this one on my social media, on my discussion board post. I was just saying, you know, even if they were just repeating what they've heard their parents talk about, like, I think it's still awesome that they chose to get up there and talk about it. I think it's just a good example for them to, you know, be involved in the government process and to, you know, just good experience for, you know, having your voice heard at such a young age. So I feel like over time, I'm sure they develop their own principles and ideas that may be similar or different, but I just thought, yeah, it's awesome that they feel strongly enough about it to, like, I can't see my 12-year-old girl getting up there and doing that. Like, scary. So anyway.
I definitely don't think they were parroting. They were both very adamant about what they were saying. And I'm sure that their parents taught them those things, but I could tell that they both really believed what they were saying. And I think we need more kids like that, because kids, like they both said, kids are the ones who are going to suffer from the same-sex marriage thing. And so I think it would do a lot if we heard more from kids. But yeah, I don't see my kids doing that either.
Yeah, I think the same thing. I don't think that they were parroting. I think that was something that was inside of them. And I like how the one girl said, so which of my parents do I not need? You know, basically, which one can I give up? It kind of brought I think the point home. All right. We already covered the next one. How is this, let's see. Let's see. How is this different coming from a child's perspective rather than adults? Why is that powerful? Sometimes I think when we grow up, we lose the perspective we had as a child. You know, we lose that feeling of what would be happening in my life right now should I lose one of my parents. You know, they still have that perspective. We see it from kind of like a helicopter view, and I think it's important that we hear what they're thinking. Same with divorce. You know, kids, their voices are left out of the whole, you know, no fault divorce. Well, yeah, mom and dad could just leave each other whenever, but here I am left to hold the bag of all your baggage. You know, we forget that the kids, although they need parents to guide them, they still have feelings, they have thoughts that are important to how we govern our lives. Anybody else want to weigh in on that?
Oh, go ahead, Courtney.
I just had a quick thought with that. I just think that the children are our future generation, and giving them practice to share their thoughts and beliefs is going to strengthen them too, as they might become the political leaders of our day in the future. So.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Janet, when you were talking about divorce and how we kind of, you know, we're not a child going through divorce, so we can't really speak for them. Was it in this class where we were reading that one, like some children in divorce, even though they go to the judge and say, hey, I don't feel comfortable living with this parent, or I don't want to assign them to, you know, spend whatever 50-50 or spend time. I don't know. I just feel like children's voices really are lacking in our judicial system. So that just reminded me of that.
I think if we were to hear the children's voices more, I think it would have more of an impact and it would change things more. And so I wonder, you know, why is it that we aren't hearing the children's voices? Is it because the adults are just so selfish and just focused on what they want, that they're not really worried about the children? Is there some other thing going on of why we, you know, we don't hear from the children? Because that is something that really can change hearts and minds when you hear the feelings of a child from a child in regards to anything. I mean, even when we're raising our kids and they come to us and they say, well, Billy hurt my feelings. Well, you feel for that child and you're going to be compassionate with them and you're going to talk to them and you're going to try and figure out what's best for them to work through this issue. And I think the more, if we can hear more of the children's views, then I think it would be very impactful, and then we would probably see some more changes. I don't know. I could be wrong, but that was just a thought that I had.
Can I just comment on what Elisa said, how she was saying, why don't we hear from them more? This is something I said in a discussion, either my discussion board or responding, I don't remember, but I said, society is only interested in a child's opinion if it furthers their cause. So, you know, like we see on TV all the time, starving children in Africa and Ethiopia, and they use those stories to pull the heartstrings, like what you were talking about, Elisa, with the compassion. But we don't hear from children when it comes to defending traditional family because they don't want to hear, you know, the world doesn't want to hear that, or not the world, but like, for example, the UN. They're not going to put a child up to, they don't want to hear from children about defending traditional family. They only want to hear from children if it furthers their cause. So like, I think it talked about when we did the week of where we watched the video about AIDS in one of the African countries, and those two kids told their story, and the UN wanted nothing to do with that because it went against what they were trying to promote. So I think that's probably why we don't hear from them more, that. And I mean, those girls were amazing, like what it took for them to get to that point where they were giving that kind of a speech to a group of people like that. There's a lot that goes into that. And I just think maybe, unless they're like super motivated and like the future, you know, president of whatever, maybe they don't get to that point as kids, but they definitely should. I agree with you.
It's amazing that there's such a disconnect, like on the UN level, you know, they wanted the CRC to be ratified. Children have all the rights, all the power that they can have, and discredit their parents. But then when it really counts to what's really affecting their lives, they don't want to hear about any of that stuff. They don't want them to have the feeling side of being a child. Just the power, I can do whatever, you know. It's like this big march, Our Lives Matter, you know. I don't know. It's just kind of out of control a little bit, I think. The parental role is being taken away. Let's see. Should children's views be considered in decision regarding family policy? From our discussion, I would say we all say yes. Anybody have any other further things they want to say about that? No? Okay. Do you think these individuals have prayerfully sought to study and understand the doctrine of the family?
So I was still thinking about the question you were asking before. I was just, because you just mentioned like the March of Our Lives, and that's been very pulled by the teenagers at the Florida high school. That's been a kind of a child-directed, well, teenage-directed cause. And I don't know your guys' stance on that particular issue. It doesn't necessarily relate to family policy, but I think it's a little scary because it hinders the Second Amendment. And, you know, there's probably better ways to go about things. But that is an example of the youth taking on control. And I think that maybe children's should be considered, but I think they also need to be grounded with adults too, because I think adults do have the experience and the maturity of years past. However, there's definitely adults that could totally corrupt things too. So it's kind of an upside down world, but I do think that they can be heard. But I do think that there's value in the wise of people who are older.
Courtney, I didn't think about that, but that's a good point. My daughter, she texted me from school last Friday, and she's like, "Mom, there's this march against gun violence for life in DC. Can I go to it?" And I was like, okay, we don't believe in gun control, and that's what that is. I mean, it might be a march against gun violence, but it's a march against guns. And she didn't even get that. She's like, I just thought it was to, remember those who were lost. She didn't even know what it was about. And so I think if children and teens are going to be heard, we need to make sure they're informed. And the problem with that is, who are they being informed by? Is it their parents who, for example, with the march, are for gun control? So I guess that's a good point that you make, that we got to be careful about their involvement of things like that.
I wanted to add to that. So they had the march, but then also prior to that, they had the different walkout days, walking out. And so at my daughter's, I have 2 daughters that are in high school. And so when the day came of that walkout, all these students walked out, and my daughter and a bunch of other daughters, they were all left behind, and their education was hindered because the teacher really couldn't teach because all these students were gone. And so we live in a small community, and our sheriff's children go to the high school, our chief deputy sheriff, we have a lot of detectives and people that have their kids at that school. And so I was talking with our chief deputy, and he said, my daughter was texting me, and he's not LDS. He says, my daughter was texting me and saying, what do I do, Dad? All these people are walking out. What do I do? And he said, you stay in your class. And then a few days later, the school board the superintendent had a meeting with law enforcement to discuss measures of how to approach a situation if there was, gun violence there on campus. And our chief deputy told the superintendent, I'm going to pull my daughter from school. And the superintendent was really perplexed and said, why? And he says, because you are allowing those students to run that school. This walkout was orchestrated by 2 of the teachers at the school, and it was permitted by the principal. And he said, it's okay for them to have a voice, but they need to do it on their own time. And he says, we get called out to the school all the time on various issues, and there is a lack of parenting. There is a lack of school administration that is taking care of these things. And this current administration at the school is allowing these children to run the school. And so it goes back to kind of, what Courtney and what you were saying, that, they need to be able to have their voice, but they need to have direction. And so the chief deputy said, that's fine if they want to do that. Do it before school, do it on lunch break, but do not do it to where it negatively impacts all of the students. And don't have your teachers instigating this, because it causes chaos. And chaos is where we're going to really start having some problems. And the principal, she got fired. So her contract was not renewed. So she's not coming back next year because the superintendent realized, okay, this isn't okay. And the principal, she's extremely liberal. She's a mess, but so there you go.
That whole thing shows why the UN wants the CRC to be ratified. Remember, it had that thing about they can attend any protest they want. So there wouldn't be any ability for the administration or the parents to say, you can't protest during this time, because right there in that CRC, it says they can attend any protest they want to without any adult interfering. So the UN, I keep thinking the UN is just really crafty. They have some really crafty things going on, and has more power than we think. Just in this last couple of weeks, we've seen the power it could have if these kids don't have any parental say. Okay.
Antichrist. They really are. They really are, because they're anti-family, and we know that anti-family is Antichrist. So I just think of them in my head as the Antichrist every time I hear the name UN.
I totally agree. Let's see. Okay. Now this whole which of these readings do you side with more and why? Okay, I guess we're talking now about what women know, and the other one, the what was the name of the one that came up as opposition of Julie B. Beck's thing? Mothers Who Know and Mothers
Know and What Women Know were the
Okay.
two.
All right. So which of these readings do you side with more?
I could only read Sister Beck's, so I could never find the other one. I clicked on the link, it said it wasn't available. I tried to do a Google search, and so I don't know what the other one was about. So
You're probably better off for it. It was
really,
on today. The link was working today, and you guys, I was cringing the whole time I was reading that. It was just like doctrines of men, false doctrine, red flag through the whole thing. So I'm hoping none of you say that you sided with that, because it was really hard to read.
I just like noticed how I felt when I was reading the two. Like when I just started, with the Mothers Who Know, and I was like, well, I'm gonna be a mom soon, and so I started like setting all these goals, and it just pumped me up and kind of filled me with the spirit. And I think that was an outward expression of how I was feeling about it. And then when I started reading The Woman Who Knows, I was like, I hate this. Like I just didn't feel the same at all, and I didn't gain any inspiration from it or whatever. And like I felt like I got everything I needed, and I felt the most spark from the first one, because it really felt like that was the one that was going to make the difference in my life. Just talking about like having projects for your kids to learn and keeping them informed, and keeping them active and knowing how to manage their time. They're just things that will help your children be a productive adult. And the woman's one was a little more selfish or self-centered. It was kind of more just what the woman wants to do with her life, she should be able to do with it. And yes, encourage the LDS doctrine if you can, but if that doesn't fit, then do what you want, kind of thing. And I just wasn't like, yeah, well, because it was also by an LDS person's perspective, Alyssa, the woman's one, and that was the interesting part. And you do hear LDS people kind of, I guess it's weird because they try to manipulate what has been taught at the pulpit by the prophets, and it sounds nice, but it's really not, and you don't feel the spirit, and it's just not gonna make the difference.
Did you notice too, sorry, Stacy, I was just gonna say that everything that they said in that second article, they were taking everything that Sister Beck said to extremes. Mm-hmm. Like it was, why should women only nurture children? Well, she didn't say that, and the proclamation doesn't say that. The proclamation says primarily that is a woman's job from Heavenly Father, and it also says that individual circumstances warrant adaptation. But they didn't say anything about that. They just took it to extreme. So I don't know if any of you guys are Star Wars fans, but like in Star Wars, he says only a Sith deals in absolutes, and that's what I saw, was just black and white, black and white. There was no gray area through the whole thing.
Yeah, Misty, I was going to say the same thing. I just was like, when I was reading it, I was like, man, they just like read way too much into it. Like the things they were saying, I'm like, that's not even what Sister Beck was trying to, they just like tried to like find things like, how are you saying about the nurturing where, well, men can be nurturers too. Well, yeah, duh. Like I felt like a lot of what they said was just common sense, not like, yeah, but I mean, yeah, it was just kind of ridiculous, I thought, the whole thing. And I'm not sure why they felt prompted to tear it apart. It doesn't really make sense to me.
I think something I noticed is they kind of separated women from mothers in it. And women should prepare to be mothers if they can, and they should go coincide with each other. Of course, there's certain situations that, merit otherwise, but for the most part, women and mothers, it's kind of the same thing. When you're a little girl, you're preparing to be a mother. And I think they separated it too much. They took the mothering out of the woman. So that's something I thought about.
Well, I remember when Julie B. Beck gave this talk and the stir it caused. I don't know if any of you remember that, but right after her talk, she was really, the social media really dogged her, and there were articles about her and lots of backlash, and I felt bad for her. But I remember when she gave that talk, it was a guilt provoking talk. If you have a child, I had a child who was not making the right choices, and it makes you feel guilty as a mother. So I think maybe some of that is what came out in that other article, are these mothers who can't quite live up to the standard or don't think they're going to, so they're going to defend their position, you know. But they did what I believe they went to the extreme. Like they talked about how they value women no matter how they're dressed, or, you know, they work hard, so they don't have the right shoes, or, you know, they're poor. That's not what she was saying. She was saying that people, even in hard circumstances, they put on their Sunday best, they iron their kids' clothes, and they take them to church, so they understand that covenants are important. That's all she was saying. But they tore her apart for that. You know, it was a big storm, at least in my area, of when that talk came out. But I think everything she said, everything is important, and it's a great guideline for moms of setting the tone in their home. I think it's a great thing, even though it can make you go, oh man, I missed the mark on that. Well, yeah, we're going to miss the mark. And I liked how in Elder Christofferson's talk, he said, I don't mean to make you feel guilty, or I don't mean to set you up on this high pedestal where you can't achieve what I'm saying, but take it with the spirit of what I'm saying. You know, understand these are guidelines, and you're not going to be perfect. And I think maybe she said that at the end of her talk. You're not going to be perfect. None of us are going to be perfect, but these are things to reach for. Maybe it wouldn't have been such a backlash, but, you know, I think she was inspired in her talk. Anybody else have
I definitely thought she was inspired. I have quoted that talk so many times, especially to my kids when they want to join another club or take on another activity. I'm like, mothers who know do less, and they tell their family to do less. I'm seriously going to like frame that on my wall, because I really believe that, and I believe that talk was amazingly inspired. One thing that really concerned me was at the bottom of the document, there are signatures, right? There are so many members of the church who signed this thing that I was just like, oh my gosh, like I couldn't even believe what I was looking at. And they even, you know, in that thing talked about the story in the Book of Mormon of the 2,000 stripling warriors, and how that's a horrible story. That's not a good, that's all about war and bloodshed. And why did she use that in her talk? And I was like, hey, anytime you start dissing the scriptures, like that's just a red flag for me for apostasy, like personal apostasy. Just the same thing, like when you speak ill of your leaders. And that's what they did from the very beginning of the talk. They said, we felt inspired, and what was the word they used? Several ideas within the body of President Beck's talk conflict with our inspiration and experience. And my thought when I read that was that the problem is with you, not with her. The problem is with you personally. If you take issue with something that's given in a conference talk, that's a personal issue, and you're not where you need to be spiritually. That's what I think anyway.
One thing I thought when I saw the signatures, I thought, you know, in how many people are members of the church, how few people really signed it. When you think about it, it's just a, you know, so their view wasn't really even taken seriously by most members of the church. You know, it's enough to make you think, what are you thinking? But, you know, it's like this little group that, and no one's going to pay attention to them. That was my thinking. And Beth, have anything? We'll go to the, let's see. We already talked about, what do you think was the tone and intent of the What Women Know article? And we covered that, I think, pretty well. Did you see any of these philosophies of men mingled with doctrine? If so, where? Do you have anything specific you want to say about that?
I was thinking the whole thing was, yeah, it's like things that make sense. Like, yeah, men should be nurturers as well, but they're putting it in a way to make Sister Beck sound bad, or the LDS Church sound oppressing to women. And I think that's where you have some people reading this and they go, oh, yeah, that does make sense. Like, you know, men should be nurturers. Men, you know, we should be equal. And, you know, and then they start thinking it's just very deceptive, and it's one of Satan's tactics. So I feel like that's how they got all these signatures. You know, these people that signed may have, I don't know. I just think it's easy for people to get twisted into that kind of stuff. That's why it's really important to like stick to the doctrine and stick to, you know, all these things and stay on the straight and narrow, because I mean, it's easy to get pulled away by people who are very good at being deceptive like that.
I agree. We need to figure out where our thoughts are coming from, you know. Okay, what do you know a woman's role to be in our Father's plan? I think the church does a great job of setting out the roles, like in the family proclamation, but also in just the talks and the way they treat women. You know, they say we're oppressed in this church, but we are put on a pedestal and we are treated, for the most part, with respect. You know, you're gonna have a few country bumpkins that have this old man philosophy that, you know, men are better than women and they're gonna treat you like that. But that's just their problem. That's not what the gospel teaches, and that's not what Christ or Heavenly Father teaches. So I don't have a problem with it, but I want to hear your views. Nobody has any thoughts on that? No? Okay. How can we avoid being deceived by the world's philosophies of men and women's roles?
Janet, can you say that one more time? My computer
Yes.
was glitching.
Okay. How can we avoid being deceived by the world's philosophies of men's and women's roles? I think the world is starting to see our roles totally differently, especially if you listen to the UN, and mothers are so oppressed if they're in their home. Elder Christofferson addressed that really well in his talk.
Honestly, for me, when I read something like that document that we read, the first thing I think is they weren't holding to the rod. They weren't reading their scriptures or clinging to the word of God. And that's also the revealed word of God, which includes the family proclamation, conference talks. For me, it's specifically the Book of Mormon, because the Book of Mormon is more, well, it was written for us today, and it's more pure in its translation than the Bible. So for me, when I think of holding to the rod, it's specifically the Book of Mormon. And that whole vision of the tree of life tells us that when people don't hold on, they're led off into strange paths. And that whole, what women know, is that's what that is. That's just a path into the mists. So for me, you know, clinging to the word of God, that vision is like there's a literal, you know, interpretation of that we have to cling if we don't want to be lost. So yeah. And Elisa, we haven't heard from you very much. I was just wondering if there's a reason for that.
Oh, am I supposed to be taking notes? Oh, bonus.
No, you're
Not at all. You
yeah.
haven't said much, and so I'm like, are we offending her, or is she just no? You're not.
No, I'm trying to take notes. I was thinking.
Okay, well, we're both taking notes.
Okay.
What's funny, Alyssa, is Misty texted us in our group earlier and said, "Do either of you want to trade? I don't want to take notes today."
And somehow I missed that little happy text. It's been a rough week. Sorry about that, lady.
It was just to the three of us that have the meeting the roles this time.
Oh, okay.
Courtney or I. That's good.
Okay, I'm on it.
Okay, so I don't need to take notes anymore now that we're on the last question. That's a relief. Whew. Okay. Sorry.
I was gonna say something, but that was really funny, so kind of distracted me. But I think I was gonna say something about the world. If you just separate the world and the gospel, the paths are clear. One goes not the direction you want to go, and one goes the direction you do want to go. And that kind of goes along with what Misty was saying. You just got to hold to the word of God. And I think that's really what it comes down to. And just, you know, weed out what the world is saying from what God is saying and follow God, and you'll be okay.
That's true. We stick to the word. We're not going to be deceived. Yeah. Okay. That's the end of the questions. Anybody have anything else they want to say before we have one of our great note takers give us the review?
So I was just going to say, next week we have another HOA, right?
We do, except for she was going to cancel the one on the Easter weekend. So do you think she's going to cancel next week's? I mean, because it is Easter weekend. I don't know.
Okay.
I bet we do, but
Okay.
So next week it's Stacy, you're setting up the HOA. Allie's doing the discussion leader, and Elisa, I don't know. I feel bad. I don't want you to have to do the notes next week.
I can do notes. I can do notes. It's fine. It's fine. I was warming up this week. This was practice.
I just want to say that I'm grateful for you ladies, and I'm grateful to be able to have these HOAs and to come with my opinions, knowing that we're probably going to feel the same way about things like this week. It's like comforting to know that there are members of the church who get it. And I don't mean to sound like prideful or anything like that. It's just I feel that many members maybe don't understand the doctrine the way that they should, especially the doctrine of the family. So I'm just grateful for you guys, and yeah, I'll miss you.
yeah, this is a great group. I write about it in my journal all the time when they, things I learned from you guys. I said I wrote that I feel like I'm the kindergarten in the college class when I'm with you guys. You're so up here with all your knowledge and your thoughts. You're great.
As a thought with that, we could always add each other on Facebook and then support each other's posts that are like, so if we keep, I don't plan to like post every week like we've had to do in this class or anything, but every once in a while when I have a thought, I might post something and I might need you guys to support me with all the opposing.
We could even make a group, we could call it Advocacy Sisters or something. I don't know.
That's
just
great.
Our little group.
Yeah.
Oh, I was going to tell you guys, I don't know, maybe I heard about it in this class, but there's a Facebook group and it's called like Title of Liberty. They're just a really good advocacy Facebook page, and they post some good stuff that, I don't know, I've enjoyed seeing. So might want to look it up.
That's awesome.
With all the stuff going on with Facebook, I was thinking about deleting my Facebook account with all the, all the stuff that you're finding out with this.
If you do that, I suggest downloading all your data, because a lot of people use it kind of as a journal, and if you delete it, you can't get it back.
Ah.
There is a way to download your data.
Yeah, I did hear that. Yeah.
So that's all I'm going to say.
And you can find out what they've been recording about you, and what they haven't.
Yikes, that's a little scary.
Yeah. Well, they're finding that people that have the app on their phone, that Facebook actually has recordings of all the texts and messages and pictures they have on their phones too. Because you click that allow button. That's the big thing. That's why they're losing millions and millions of dollars. Their value just went down this last 2 weeks because of this revelation.
See, I hadn't heard anything about that. This is all new to me. This is what I'm talking about, being uninformed. Like, I don't follow current events unless my husband will call me and be like, there was a terrorist attack. I just thought you should know, because I know you won't know if I don't tell you. Like, that's really, wow.
Yeah,
I didn't realize that either.
I've kind of followed it, but my business relies on Facebook so much that I'd have to really weigh the risks there of losing it. If I lost all the people following me, then I would not be much of a point, but I don't know.
So now we know that if the UN comes after us, that they have been following everything we've been saying about them.
This group, they're too powerful. We're going to take them down.
We've been marked. We're marked women.
That's right.
It'll be like the Bourne ultimatum. All right, are you ready for me to do the summary? I'll let Elisa do it next week.
Oh, thank
All
you.
right. We're ready.
All right. Maybe I'll speak in like a British accent, and then I won't be so boring to hear myself talk for this long. Okay. Should we really teach that if you don't know what you're voting for, then you should vote? Stacy said she wasn't sure about that. She knows the church teaches us to be informed. And Courtney said sometimes it's easier to pay attention to like the big elections, but not so much on the community level. But it is important to pay attention to that, and we should be informed or not vote. And I kind of agree with that. I think if you don't know what you're doing, like get out of the kitchen kind of thing. Same, don't vote if you don't know what you're voting for. I said you should be as informed as you can in the political arena, but you shouldn't kill yourself trying to stay up to date on everything. And if you have someone you trust who is informed, try asking them, to summarize a candidate for you. Courtney felt it was important to have your own opinions and beliefs, even if like you and your husband share them, which I agree with also. So we talked about the girls who gave their little spiels about the traditional family. And we kind of all thought that even if they were just repeating what they'd heard at home, they were still awesome and they had a great influence because it was coming from them. But we also felt that because they were so determined in their speech and everything, that they were very impassioned about the topic for themselves. And Janet mentioned the one girl that said, "Which of my parents should I give up?" and how that was very powerful. And she also said that as we grow, we lose the perspective we had as a child. And it's important to hear what they're thinking on same-sex marriage as well as no-fault divorce. And Courtney said that children are our future leaders. And so it's really important to give them practice to share their thoughts and beliefs while they're kids, because that will strengthen them for later. And Stacy said that we don't have enough voices of children in our judicial system. And Elisa said that if we heard them more, they might have more of an impact on the way things are going. And she was wondering why we don't hear them more. And I talked about because we only hear them when their viewpoint sides with the agenda that's trying to be pushed. We also talked about, it's important for them to be involved, but case in point of when it can be bad is the March of Our Lives and the walkout days at school, and how the kids were just kind of, floundering on their own and kind of took that and ran, and maybe they're not getting the direction from home that they need in order to do that. So they shouldn't just be standing up for they don't know what and like taking a cause and running with it, but they should have direction and guidance on those causes. We talked a lot about the school districts and specifically teachers supporting that walkout, which I was appalled by personally, that kids should have a voice, but they need direction too. And yeah, so that's about it on the kids thing. We talked about mothers who know and what women know, and most of us, well, all of us felt that what women know was really just like a document kind of showing them going down the wrong road, the path to personal apostasy. There were red flags all over, false doctrine, doctrines of men mingled with scripture. Courtney mentioned that she felt the spirit really strongly with Sister Beck's article, and it was a completely different feeling with the second article. It blew everything out of proportion. It took everything to extremes. It, quoted Sister Beck or assumed she was saying things that she wasn't actually saying. The whole thing was ridiculous. And let's see. Courtney mentioned that the second article separated womanhood from motherhood and that those things should be kept together. And Janet talked about how much flack Sister Beck got after she gave that talk, which I wasn't actually aware of at all. This is the first time I've heard of anybody posting anything in opposition to what she said. She thought that everything Sister Beck said was right in line with the gospel. It was a perfect guideline for moms in setting the tone in their homes, and that it's important to remember that that is the guideline. It's kind of like Pirates of the Caribbean. The code's more guidelines than rules. I like movie references, if you can't tell. So yes, they're talking about what the ideal standard is for motherhood, but that doesn't mean that if we're not perfect, we don't make the cut or whatever. Not only did that document criticize one of our church leaders, but it talked about the Book of Mormon itself and how one of the stories that we often quote as being inspirational was actually sad and destructive. And so I said that if you take issue with something that's said from the conference pulpit, the problem is with you, not with the church leader who gave the talk. Let's see. Stacy said that women, what women know was meant to make Sister Beck sound bad and make the LDS Church sound oppressive. It was very deceptive and manipulative, and she wasn't sure how they got so many signatures. It's very easy for people to get twisted up in false doctrine. And Janet said we have to be careful about which spirit we're following and what kind of inspiration we're following. Janet also said the church does a great job of setting out the rules in the proclamation and talks that are given at conference, and that women are put on a pedestal in the church. Members' views may vary, but the gospel does not teach oppression of women. And then at the end, Courtney said, if you separate the world and the gospel, the paths are clear. So that's about it.
You know, in light of we're having conference, we had a gal visit our ward a few weeks ago, and she said something to the effect that someone she knew is the person who actually takes all the conference talks that are going to be given, and they go through it line by line, and they verify that whether it's doctrinally sound or not. And no one's able to give a talk, not even the apostles. They have to submit theirs too, to make sure that every line in there is something that is doctrinally sound. It's pure doctrine. What we're taught, no matter who gives the talk, it's all pure doctrine. I just thought that was interesting. I didn't realize they had to submit and have it gone through with a fine-tooth comb. Anyway, just your bit of trivia there. Thanks everybody for coming.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Have a great week.
Yeah, all of you have a great week.
Happy Easter and happy General Conference.
Yeah, enjoy General Conference. I'm excited.
Good.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.